The clinking of fine crystal filled the private dining room of the Waldorf Astoria, where Ariel Torres sat across from her billionaire husband, Damon Blackwell. A candlelit glow danced across the white linen tablecloth, silver cutlery gleaming as if polished for royalty. Tonight marked their second wedding anniversary, and everything was set to feel timeless until her phone buzzed. She reached for it casually, expecting a sweet message from her grandmother or a reminder from the hospital where she once worked as a nurse. Instead, the screen lit up with one word that stole the air from her lungs: run. Her hand froze. Her heart stuttered. The sender's number was unknown. Ariel's throat tightened as she stared at the glowing message. The room no longer felt safe. The warmth of the candles, the soothing violin melody in the background, even the perfume of roses placed on their table, all of it dimmed, replaced by a rush of unease. She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting Damon's eyes across the table. His expression was unreadable. There was no smile, no light-hearted remark, no curiosity about what might be on her phone. His dark eyes locked onto hers with a quiet intensity that unsettled her more than the message itself. The champagne fizzed in their glasses, untouched. A perfect evening, suddenly broken by two words that seemed to shatter everything. Ariel's fingers trembled as she turned the phone face down on the table, pressing it into the linen as if she could hide the warning along with her growing fear. But fear had already arrived. Only minutes earlier, Ariel had been swept into the moment. The violinist had begun playing one of her favourite songs, the one Damon once requested on their first date. She'd smiled, savouring the nostalgia. The waiter poured their wine with reverence, as if aware of how important this evening was. She had chosen her dress carefully, a flowing silk gown Damon had given her last Christmas. He said it brought out the amber undertones in her skin, and tonight she wanted to believe in that kind of devotion again. But the text cut through all of it. Now the glow of the candles felt less like warmth and more like interrogation lamps. The roses between them no longer symbolized romance, but something fragile and temporary, as if beauty itself was under threat. Ariel forced her lips into a smile, determined not to let Damon notice the storm in her chest. Yet, as he leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp, she wondered whether the shift in atmosphere was only in her imagination, or if Damon sensed it too. The violin's melody, once sweet, now felt hollow. The waiter's polite distance seemed calculated. The hotel's silence pressed in on her ears, louder than the music. The private dining room, designed to be intimate and romantic, was suddenly stifling. A place of celebration had become a cage. Ariel's mind raced as she replayed the message in her head. Run. From what? From whom? Her stomach knotted. Her pulse pounded so fast she feared Damon could hear it across the table. She glanced down at the phone again, tempted to check for another text, but kept her hands still. Her thoughts warred within her. If she told Damon, would he laugh and call it a prank? Or worse, what if he already knew who sent it? What if the warning was about him? Her love for Damon clashed with her instincts. For 2 years she had believed in his devotion. He had built her a life most women only dreamed of, trips to Italy, a penthouse, overlooking Central Park, endless moments of passion that felt real. But now, doubt cut into her heart like glass. Could love and fear exist in the same breath? She glanced at Damon's phone as it lit up on the table, buzzing softly. A name appeared, one she didn't recognize. Damon silenced it quickly, sliding the device into his pocket with a casualness that looked practiced. Her chest tightened. Is this what the text meant? Is this why I should run? She gripped her napkin under the table, the fabric twisting in her palm. Fear was no longer a stranger. Distrust had taken its seat between them, and it wasn't leaving. The dinner had been perfect until the warning came. One word, one command: run. No explanation, no source, just urgency that gripped Ariel's heart like a vice. Have you ever trusted someone so much that the thought of them hiding something felt impossible? Have you ever questioned whether the person you love is the person you truly know? Ariel sat in that very storm, her love and her doubts colliding over one glowing screen. The problem was clear. If the text was real, her marriage, the very life she built with Damon, was sitting on a fault line ready to crack. If it was false, then why did Damon's every move feel suddenly suspect? What would you do if you were her? Stay at the table with the man you love, or trust the warning and run before it's too late? That's the choice Ariel faced on a night that was supposed to mark forever. Ariel's eyes lingered on Damon's face, searching for answers in his steady expression. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. His touch was warm, steady, but almost too firm. "You look pale," he said softly. "Is something wrong?" She forced a smile, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "No, I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Her pulse betrayed her. Her mind screamed with questions. And the phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't dare look. Viewers, let me ask you, if you were Ariel, would you trust the love you've built or the warning that told you to run? Comment your answer below. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Ashford's Love Stories. Your support helps us share more stories of love, trust, and the lessons life teaches along the way. Because tonight, Ariel's story isn't just about romance. It's about survival. Ariel Torres had never imagined her life brushing shoulders with billionaires. She grew up in Brooklyn, raised by her grandmother after her parents passed away when she was still young. Their apartment was small but filled with warmth. Her grandmother's voice carried wisdom, her meals carried love, and her rules carried the kind of discipline that shaped Ariel into a woman of strength. Becoming a nurse wasn't glamorous, but for Ariel, it was a calling. She found purpose in caring for people when they were at their lowest. Long hours, sore feet, and endless shifts in crowded wards, none of it dimmed her compassion. Her patients trusted her because she looked at them as human beings, not cases on a chart. Even as her colleagues talked about chasing better-paying careers or moving to private practices, Ariel stayed where she was needed most. Money didn't guide her choices. Kindness did. That was her strength, though she never thought it would become the reason a billionaire would notice her. Damon Blackwell lived in a reality Ariel couldn't begin to fathom. Born into Blackwell Holdings, he was the kind of man headlines followed. Ruthless in the boardroom, magnetic at social events. He was young, handsome, and already commanding an empire worth billions. Yet power didn't shield him from exhaustion. Years of non-stop work and responsibility pushed him to his limits. The pressure of running his family's company left him sleepless and detached. One evening, during a shareholder conference, Damon collapsed. His staff rushed him to the hospital, Ariel's hospital. For the first time, Damon wasn't the man in control. He wasn't the CEO. He was simply a patient in a white gown, vulnerable and worn down. It was Ariel who walked into his room that night. She treated him with the same professional care she offered to everyone else, refusing to bend under his name or wealth. To her, he wasn't Damon Blackwell, billionaire heir. He was a man who needed to rest, recover, and heal. That simplicity, that refusal to treat him differently, sparked something in him. Damon wasn't used to being dismissed. Most women bent over backward to please him. But Ariel wasn't impressed by his charm. When he tried to flirt through his exhaustion, she simply shook her head. "Save your energy. You're not going anywhere until you listen to medical advice." He smirked, but for once, he listened. In the quiet hours of the night, when his monitors beeped softly, Ariel, checked on him, adjusting his IV or encouraging him to drink water. Damon found himself watching her, studying the calm determination on her face. "Why don't you ever ask me about my work?" he asked one night. "Because you're a patient, not a headline," she replied, without looking up from her chart. Those words stayed with him. For Damon, who had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, Ariel's indifference was magnetic. It was the first time he felt seen for who he was, not for what he had. By the time he was discharged, he wasn't ready to let go of her presence. And Ariel, though cautious, found herself drawn to the vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. What started as casual conversations over follow-up visits turned into something deeper. Damon insisted on thanking Ariel with dinner. She resisted at first, wary of blurring lines, but eventually agreed. That first evening outside the hospital was nothing short of transformative. Damon opened up about his parents' expectations, the relentless competition of his world, and the loneliness that came with it. Ariel shared her own burdens, nights of working double shifts, her grandmother's failing health, and her struggle to balance duty with her own dreams. They laughed, argued playfully, and, most importantly, listened to each other. That dinner led to many more. Romance blossomed not in grand gestures, but in small moments. Damon picking her up after long shifts, so she didn't have to take the subway. Ariel cooking him simple home meals when he was tired of catered extravagance. Their love grew in quiet spaces, away from headlines and public scrutiny. For the first time, Damon let his guard down. Ariel wasn't just his lover, she was his anchor. When Damon proposed, it wasn't at a gala or on a yacht. He asked her on the rooftop of her grandmother's building, under string lights they had hung for her birthday. "You're the only one who sees me," he said, voice low, eyes sincere. Ariel said yes, because she believed him. Their wedding was lavish, of course. Nothing less was expected of Damon Blackwell, but behind the grandeur, what mattered was the way he held her hands during their vows, as if promising not just a future, but himself. Their marriage thrived in its first years. Damon was attentive, protective, and passionately devoted. Ariel matched him with loyalty and tenderness. Their intimacy was fiery, yes, but it was also grounded in respect. Damon often whispered that she was the only one who kept him sane, the only one who reminded him he was more than a title. For Ariel, the fairy tale wasn't about castles or riches. It was about being loved for who she was, not what she could give. She believed their love was unshakable. She didn't yet know how fragile even the strongest foundations could be. The first signs weren't loud, they were subtle. Damon's late nights at the office stretched into early mornings. His explanations were clipped, his phone glued to his hand even during dinner. Ariel tried to brush it off. She told herself that the pressures of leading Blackwell Holdings were immense. But it wasn't just the work. Damon no longer lingered with her in the mornings. The man who once whispered promises against her skin before leaving for the day now left quietly, without so much as a kiss. When she reached for his hand at charity galas, his fingers felt colder. He smiled for the cameras, but hardly for her. Ariel found herself watching him the way a nurse observed a patient, studying changes in behavior, waiting for the signs to reveal a diagnosis. But what was she diagnosing? A husband overwhelmed by work, or a man hiding something? It wasn't just Damon's distance, it was the way others reacted to her. At a gala for children's hospitals, Ariel noticed two women whispering behind their champagne glasses, eyes darting, toward her with pity. At another event, a man shook Damon's hand a little too knowingly, then gave Ariel a look that stung. She brushed it off at first, but the stares followed her, whispers curling through rooms she once entered proudly at Damon's side. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. When people look at you with pity, ask yourself why. Their silence says more than their words. At night, when Damon slipped into bed hours after her, Ariel lay awake, wondering if those whispers carried truths she wasn't ready to face. The biggest shift was Damon's phone. He kept it near him always, even in the shower. When it buzzed during dinner, he silenced it with a practiced flick, sliding it out of sight before she could glance at the screen. One evening, curiosity got the better of her. As he stepped into the bathroom, she reached for it. But the lock screen stopped her. Damon had always been private, yes, but this was different. When he returned, he caught her hand hovering near the device. His jaw tightened. "Curiosity isn't always healthy," he said evenly. The words weren't cruel, but they carried a sharp edge that chilled her. Ariel smiled weakly, but inside, her heart cracked a little more. With no one to confide in, Ariel turned to her old habit, journaling. Late at night, after Damon drifted into restless sleep, she scribbled her thoughts into a leather-bound notebook. Why does he feel so far away? Why do the whispers sting? Am I imagining this, or is something slipping between us? The act of writing brought her clarity. Each page told the truth she couldn't speak aloud, that trust between them was thinning. And yet, she still clung to their love. She wrote about their first dates, their vows, the moments of tenderness she couldn't forget. The journal became her lifeline, a place to hold both her doubts and her devotion. As the days passed, Ariel couldn't ignore the growing distance. She remembered her grandmother's lessons about relationships. Love is powerful, but it isn't blind. Pay attention to the small cracks, because they widen if you ignore them. Ariel knew she was ignoring cracks now. She wanted to believe in the man who once called her his anchor. But reality whispered otherwise. The red flags weren't waving in storms. They were quiet, subtle, almost polite. Damon's late nights, the guarded phone, the whispers at Gullis, each sign by itself might have meant nothing. Together, they painted a picture Ariel was afraid to see. For the first time in her marriage, she wondered if the man she trusted most was slipping out of her reach. The anniversary dinner should have been a moment of joy, but Ariel's heart was heavy. She sat across from Damon, replaying the run message in her mind. The waiter served each course with flawless timing, yet she couldn't taste a bite. She forced herself to smile, to keep the atmosphere calm. Years of being a nurse had trained her to mask panic in emergencies. Now she wore that mask for her own husband. Damon's eyes lingered on her longer than usual, searching, weighing. He reached for her hand. His grip was warm, but too firm, almost like an unspoken command. "You look pale," he said, voice low. Her lips curved in a practiced smile. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. The words in her phone had shaken her, and the silence between them grew heavier with each passing second. Damon seemed attentive on the surface. He filled her glass, asked if she liked the meal, spoke of upcoming projects, yet his tone was clipped, as if his mind lingered elsewhere. At one point, his phone lit up beside him. Ariel's gaze flickered toward it instinctively. A name she didn't recognize flashed on the screen. Damon silenced it quickly, slipping the device into his pocket. Her chest tightened. She didn't ask who it was. She couldn't bring herself to, but she noticed the faint twitch in his jaw, the kind of tell she had learned to spot during moments of stress. The violinist continued to play in the corner, but the melody no longer soothed. It pressed against her nerves, stretching them thin. Ariel realized she wasn't only battling Damon's distance, she was battling her own fear of the truth. Course after course arrived, each dish a masterpiece. Lobster risotto, seared lamb with rosemary, a decadent chocolate soufflé, All of it sat untouched. Ariel's fork scraped her plate once or twice, but she barely swallowed. As Ariel sat in that tense dining room, her mind betrayed her with memories of their early nights together. She could still feel the heat of Damon's touch, the urgency in the way. He held her as though letting her go would mean losing everything. Back then, his kisses weren't rushed or distracted. They lingered, deep and consuming, pulling her into a world where nothing else existed. He had a way of looking at her, eyes burning with intensity, that made her believe she was the center of his universe. Those nights weren't just about passion, they were about connection. Damon would trace her jawline as if memorizing her, whispering promises of forever into her skin. Ariel had felt safe in those arms. She had believed him. If nights were fire, mornings were warmth. Damon had been the kind of man who rose before the city stirred, but he never left without pulling her close first. She remembered waking up to his lips brushing her forehead, the rich smell of coffee, drifting from the kitchen, and his tie hanging loose as he prepared for work. Sometimes he'd sit at the edge of the bed, holding her hand before leaving. "Don't ever forget," he'd whisper. "You're the only part of my day that feels real." Those simple gestures etched themselves into her heart. They mattered more than the luxury trips or expensive gifts. In those moments, Damon wasn't the CEO of Blackwell Holdings. Ariel also remembered how fiercely protective Damon could be. When she walked into crowded events by his side, his arm tightened around her waist as though shielding her. Once, at a gala, a man had made a careless remark about her not fitting into Damon's world. Damon's jaw had clenched, and his hand slipped into hers. Later, in the car, he told her, "Don't ever believe them. You're more than enough." His words had been firm, his tone unshakable. Ariel had melted into his embrace that night, reassured that no amount of whispers could shake their bond. Those moments reminded her of the man who once fought to keep her by his side. But as she sat at that anniversary dinner, those memories cut deep. The passion, the tenderness, the protectiveness, they felt like ghosts compared to the man across from her now. Where once there had been fire, now there was cool calculation. Where there had been open affection, now there was guarded silence. The contrast stung. Ariel's heart ached with the realization that love could feel both eternal and fragile at once. The memories weren't lies, but were they enough to cover the secrets Damon now carried? Ariel pressed her hands together under the table, silently repeating her. Grandmother's wisdom, love can be true, but truth must live inside it. Her memories proved that Damon's love once burned bright. But love alone wasn't enough. Without transparency, without honesty, even the deepest intimacy could fade. She inhaled slowly, bracing herself for what might come next. Whether the text was a cruel joke or a lifeline, she knew one thing for sure. The man who once gave her his whole heart was no longer showing her all of it. The lesson weighed on her. Love is real, but it cannot survive without trust. The anniversary meal looked perfect, but perfection meant nothing if the air between them was poisoned by silence. Damon leaned forward at one point, watching her with narrowed eyes. "You're quiet tonight." Ariel's pulse jumped. She forced a small laugh. "Just tired." He studied her for a beat longer than comfortable, then leaned back. Tired or worried? Her breath caught. The way he phrased it felt less like a question and more like an accusation. The violinist shifted to a slower piece. One Damon had once called our song. It should have stirred nostalgia, but to Ariel it sounded like a warning. Each note stretched the tension tighter, the music pressing against her chest like a weight. She tried to ground herself by remembering gentler times. The mornings Damon brewed her coffee, the way he kissed her shoulder before leaving for work. Those memories gave her courage, but they also hurt. They felt distant, almost fragile. Her phone buzzed again on the table. She didn't touch it, but the sound alone made her heart race. Damon's eyes flicked to the device, then back to her face. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was louder than the music. Ariel realized then that silence was as dangerous as lies. Love wasn't just passion or loyalty, it was honesty. Without it, even the strongest marriage could wither. She wanted to confront him. She wanted to throw the phone on the table, show him the warning, and demand answers. But fear kept her rooted. Instead, she sat with the lesson pressing hard in her chest. Silence breeds suspicion, and suspicion kills trust. She glanced once more at Damon's face. His mask of calm didn't crack, but she couldn't shake the thought that her husband was hiding something far bigger than she could imagine. The anniversary dinner, meant to celebrate their forever, now felt like a test she wasn't sure they could survive. As Ariel sat in that tense dining room, her mind betrayed her with memories of their early nights together. She could still feel the heat of Damon's touch, the urgency in the way. He held her as though letting her go would mean losing everything. Back then, his kisses weren't rushed or distracted. They lingered, deep and consuming, pulling her into a world where nothing else existed. He had a way of looking at her, eyes burning with intensity, that made her believe she was the center of his universe. Those nights weren't just about passion, they were about connection. Damon would trace her jawline as if memorizing her, whispering promises of forever into her skin. Ariel had felt safe in those arms. She had believed him. If nights were fire, mornings were warmth. Damon had been the kind of man who rose before the city stirred, but he never left without pulling her close first. She remembered waking up to his lips, brushing her forehead, the rich smell of coffee, drifting from the kitchen, and his tie hanging loose as he prepared for work. Sometimes he'd sit at the edge of the bed, holding her hand before leaving. "Don't ever forget," he'd whisper. "You're the only part of my day that feels real." Those simple gestures etched themselves into her heart. They mattered more than the luxury trips or expensive gifts. In those moments, Damon wasn't the CEO of Blackwell Holdings. He was hers. Ariel also remembered how fiercely protective Damon could be. When she walked into crowded events by his side, his arm tightened around her waist as though shielding her. Once, at a gala, a man had made a careless remark about her not fitting into Damon's world. Damon's jaw had clenched, and his hand slipped into hers. Later, in the car, he told her, "Don't ever believe them. You're more than enough." His words had been firm, his tone unshakable. Ariel had melted into his embrace that night, reassured that no amount of whispers could shake their bond. Those moments reminded her of the man who once fought to keep her by his side. But as she sat at that anniversary dinner, those memories cut deep. The passion, the tenderness, the protectiveness. They felt like ghosts compared to the man across from her now. Where once there had been fire, now there was cool calculation. Where there had been open affection, now there was guarded silence. The contrast stung. Ariel's heart ached with the realization that love could feel both eternal and fragile at once. The memories weren't lies, but were they enough to cover the secrets Damon now carried? Ariel pressed her hands together under the table, silently repeating her grandmother's wisdom. Love can be true, but truth must live inside it. Her memories proved that Damon's love once burned bright. But love alone wasn't enough. Without transparency, without honesty, even the deepest intimacy could fade. She inhaled slowly, bracing herself for what might come next. Whether the text was a cruel joke or a lifeline, she knew one thing for sure. The man who once gave her his whole heart was no longer showing her all of it. The lesson weighed on her. Love is real, but it cannot survive without trust. The first text had unsettled Ariel, but when her phone buzzed again, her pulse spiked. She hesitated before sliding it toward her lap, shielding the screen from Damon's view. This time the words were longer, sharper. "He isn't who you think he is." Her chest tightened. The air in the room felt heavier. Damon was speaking to the waiter, but his voice sounded distant, muffled by the pounding of her heartbeat. She turned the phone face down again, her palms clammy. A chill ran up her arms. If the first message had been a warning, this second one felt like a revelation waiting to unravel her world. Ariel excused herself softly, sliding her chair back with trembling grace. Damon's eyes followed her, curious but not questioning. She walked quickly, almost too quickly, into the restroom. Locking herself in a stall, she leaned against the door, pressing the phone to her chest before daring to read again. Another message appeared. "Tonight, you'll understand." Her breath hitched. The restroom mirror reflected her pale face, eyes wide with disbelief. She had never been one to panic, but fear now had roots deep inside her. Her grandmother's words came back to her like a whisper in her ear. "Love is trust, but never blind trust." She stood at the sink, staring at her reflection. Was she the same woman who once believed Damon's promises, without question? The woman who thought marriage could conquer all? Her phone buzzed again. "Trust no one. Run." The words sliced into her. She thought of the dinners, the whispered vows, the intimacy that once seemed unbreakable. Could all of it have been a mask? Ariel closed her eyes, gripping the porcelain sink until her knuckles whitened. Fear urged her to leave now, to disappear before the truth caught up with her. But her heart, stubborn and loyal, demanded answers. Torn between two worlds, Ariel's thoughts spun. Loyalty told her to walk back to Damon, demand the truth, and hold on to the marriage she had built. Survival told her to grab her purse and leave without looking back. Her grandmother had always taught her that blind loyalty was a prison, but walking away without answers would haunt her forever. The restroom silence pressed down on her. She knew this wasn't just about love anymore. It was about who Damon truly was, and whether the man she married still existed beneath the secrets. Ariel steadied her breathing and dabbed her face with a tissue, preparing to return to the table. She knew whatever came next could change her life. She slid her phone into her clutch. Her decision not yet made. Her pulse raced as she whispered under her breath, "I need to know." Viewers, let me ask you, what would you do if you were Ariel? Would you confront Damon, demand the truth, and risk everything? Or would you run, trusting the warning without waiting for proof? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're gripped by this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the truth Ariel uncovers. Because tonight, every choice carries a consequence. When Ariel returned to the dining room, Damon was no longer casually sipping his wine. His posture had changed. Back straighter, gaze sharper, expression unreadable. As she slipped back into her seat, he studied her with unnerving patience. His fingers tapped once against his glass before he spoke. "You were gone a while," he said. She forced a small smile. Needed a moment. His eyes didn't soften. Instead, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's something you don't know, Ariel. Something I've kept from you." The words landed like a stone in her stomach. This was it, the moment the warnings pointed to. But Damon's tone wasn't angry. It was careful, almost calculated. Her throat tightened. She clasped her hands in her lap, bracing herself. Damon swirled the wine in his glass, his gaze never leaving hers. "I never wanted to involve you. I thought I could keep you safe if I kept it hidden." Safe. The word jolted her. Safe. From what? From whom? She opened her mouth, but no words came. He continued, his voice low but steady. "Everything you see in my world, The wealth, the business, the empire, it has shadows. Shadows I've spent years trying to protect you from." Her pulse thundered in her ears. The text messages replayed in her mind. "He isn't who you think he is. Trust no one." "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His jaw flexed. "Because they've found a way to reach you." She gripped her napkin tightly. Who are you talking about?" Damon's eyes flicked toward the entrance of the room, as if expecting someone to walk in. Then he leaned closer. "There are people tied to Blackwell Holdings who don't care about rules. They don't care about loyalty. All they care about is power." His words sent a chill racing through her. Ariel searched his face, trying to decide if this was truth or manipulation. "You've hidden this from me all this time," she pressed. "I had to," Damon said, voice sharper now. "I couldn't risk dragging you into it, but I underestimated them. And now—" He cut himself off, jaw tightening again. "And now what?" she demanded, her voice shaking. His silence was worse than an answer. Ariel steadied herself, her fear burning into anger. "If you've been hiding this, how am I supposed to trust you? You said you respected me. You said I was the only one who saw the real you. Was that a lie, too?" His eyes darkened, but not with rage, with something closer to desperation. "I meant every word," he said firmly. "But if I had told you everything, you would have been a target sooner. I thought I could shield you." Her phone buzzed again in her clutch. Damon noticed the flicker in her eyes. "Who's contacting you?" he asked, his tone tightening. She swallowed hard, keeping her face still. "No one important." For the first time that night, his mask slipped. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flaring. The table between them felt like a battlefield. Damon had given her half-truths, veiled warnings, and promises of protection. But Ariel couldn't shake the thought that love without honesty wasn't love at all. It was control. She leaned forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "If you want me to believe you, Damon, then you tell me everything. No half answers, no walls. I deserve the truth." For a long moment he said nothing. The violinist had stopped playing, and the silence was crushing. Finally, Damon set his glass down, his jaw tense. "You're right. You deserve the truth. But once I tell you, nothing between us will be the same." Her breath caught. She braced herself for the words that would either save their marriage or destroy it. Ariel's heart was still pounding when the dining room doors opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, his gaze locking instantly on Damon. His presence was commanding, almost invasive, as though he didn't need an invitation. Damon stiffened. The mask of calm he wore slipped for the first time that night. "You shouldn't be here," Damon muttered under his breath. The man smirked, his eyes flicking toward Ariel. "She deserves to know the truth, don't you think?" Ariel froze. The text messages, the warnings, they hadn't come from nowhere. Someone had orchestrated this moment, and now she was face to face with it. Damon stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Leave her out of this." But the stranger ignored him, turning his full attention to Ariel. "Did he tell you how much blood was spilled to protect Blackwell Holdings? Did he tell you how many promises he broke to stay on top?" Her throat went dry. She looked at Damon, desperate for him to deny it. Instead, he clenched his fists, jaw tight, saying nothing. Silence was an answer. Ariel felt the ground shift beneath her. The man she thought she knew wasn't just hiding business secrets. He was hiding a past that could put them both in danger. Viewers, what would you do if someone exposed your partner in front of you like this? Would you believe the accuser or trust the one you love? Share in the comments. I want to see how you'd react. Tears welled in Ariel's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She had promised herself she would never let fear silence her. "Damon," she said firmly, her voice steady though her hands shook under the table. "You told me you loved me because I was the only one who saw you as a man, not a billionaire. But now I have to ask, who exactly did I marry?" The stranger leaned back, satisfied. Damon's shoulders slumped. His voice, when it came, was heavy. "You married both," he admitted. "The man who loves you, and the man who has enemies that won't stop until they destroy everything." The words hit her harder than the texts. She had always known Damon carried burdens, but to hear it laid bare, with no excuses left, stripped her illusions clean. The stranger slipped Damon a folded envelope, then left as quickly as he arrived. The dining room fell silent again, leaving only the echo of unanswered questions. Damon didn't open the envelope. Instead, he looked at Ariel with eyes full of conflict. "I didn't want this life to touch you, but I've failed. And now the choice is yours. Walk away or stay and risk it all." Ariel's chest ached. She thought of the vows they exchanged, of his tenderness in their early days, of the nights filled with love and whispered promises. She thought of her grandmother's lessons. Loyalty must be earned, not demanded. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about survival, about her dignity, about the truth. Ariel pushed her chair back slowly. Damon reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her voice trembling yet clear. "I don't know what I'll decide tonight," she said, "but I know this. Love without truth is not love at all. If you want me to stay, Damon, then tomorrow there will be no more secrets." Her words hung heavy in the air. Damon didn't fight them. He simply nodded, as though he understood this was his last chance. Ariel walked out of the dining room, her heart torn between fear and the remnants of love. She didn't know if she'd run or if she'd face the storm with him, but she knew she wouldn't be blind anymore. Viewers, the question is yours now. Can love survive secrets? If you believe it can, type "love can heal" in the comments. If you believe trust once broken is gone forever, type "truth over love." Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Ashford's Love Stories for more powerful tales of romance, betrayal, and the lessons life teaches us. Because sometimes one text message can change everything. Ariel stepped out of the dining room, the sounds of the violin fading behind her. The city lights greeted her through the tall glass windows of the hotel lobby. She paused, her reflection staring back at her, no longer the same woman who had walked in with confidence 2 hours earlier. Her phone buzzed again, but this time she didn't check it. She needed space to breathe, to think without being pulled by warnings or confessions. The night air was cool as she stepped outside. Every breath reminded her that choices had weight. She wasn't only Damon's wife, she was a woman with her own power, her own voice. She replayed Damon's words. He loved her, yes, but he had hidden truths that could have endangered them both. Could love survive such cracks? She wasn't sure. Ariel realized love wasn't only about passion and intimacy, it was about safety, honesty, and respect. Without those, even the deepest bond could feel fragile. The memories of Damon's tenderness clashed with the stranger's accusations. Both versions of Damon existed, the man who held her close and the man who had enemies circling their lives. Her grandmother's wisdom rang in her heart. Love is trust, but never blind trust. For the first time that night, Ariel felt clarity. She didn't need to decide everything now. What she needed was to reclaim her power. She thought of the life she built before Damon, working double shifts, caring for patients, holding her grandmother's hand. She had been strong then, and she was strong now. If Damon wanted her to stay, he would need to meet her on equal ground, with honesty and respect. Anything less was not love, it was control. Ariel's story carried lessons not only for her, but for anyone who had ever loved deeply. And love must be rooted in truth. Secrets are cracks that widen over time. Honor loyalty must be earned, not demanded. Blind devotion can be dangerous. Your worth is not tied to another person. You can love fully and still choose yourself. She whispered softly to herself, "My love is strong, but my truth is stronger." And for the first time that evening, her steps felt lighter. Viewers, Ariel's story is a reminder that love without trust is fragile and that every heart deserves both passion and honesty. If you believe love can heal through truth, type "love can heal" in the comments. If you believe trust, once broken, cannot be rebuilt, type truth over love. And don't forget, like this video, share it with someone who needs this lesson, and subscribe to Mr. Ashford's Love Stories for more powerful tales that stir the heart and challenge the mind. Because sometimes the hardest decisions teach us the most important lessons about love, loyalty, and ourselves.